Just how important is this question of honesty? First full paragraph on page 58, the last sentence, the last 3 lines. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, and we're seeing a lot of that these days. It's always been around, but now everybody's coming in here with much more specific diagnoses and carting their little pill cases around with them. I didn't say pillowcases, I said pill cases. They're a cocktail of all these various marvelous and wonderful inventions of the pharmaceutical industry. There are those who have grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Does that tell us how critically important honesty is? And by the way, honesty is not the principle behind the first step. That's total nonsense. There are no principles behind the steps. Steps are the principles. Honesty is something which is a gift from God. Dishonesty is a major character defect. We don't get rid of our dishonesty ourselves. We have to have God's help with it. Dishonesty is always the product of fear. We are not dishonest unless we are afraid of the consequences of being honest. Honesty has absolutely nothing to do with the first step in the sense of it being any kind of a principle. But it is an essential that we develop the capacity to be honest. And we're going to develop that by working the steps. Let's make sure we understand. Please go to page 75. I beg your pardon, 73. On page 73, we are now looking at the 5th step. The first partial paragraph at the top of the page describes for us in the last sentence what happens when we work the 5th step. They have not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense we find it necessary until they told someone else all their life story. Therefore, we see that honesty is a great gift through the grace of God comes to us when we do our 5th step. Going back to page 58 now, please. The 2nd paragraph. The 3rd line. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. Parse the sentence and see what it's really saying. First, if. If what? If you have decided. It is another decision which must be made. It ought to be part and parcel of the decision of the 3rd step. Why? Because when we say the 3rd step prayer, we are not only asking God for help, but we are committing ourselves to go forward with the rest of the steps. We're saying, God, if you'll do these things for me, I'll do my part. If you have decided you want what we have. Now, part of our maybe the most important part of our work in working with sponsees, especially in the initial stages of our work with them when they're new, is to demonstrate to them the power of God and God's way of life working in and through us, to demonstrate God's love working in and through us, so that they will want what we have. The third step prayer, remember, is going to ask God to do this for us, to allow us to be this kind of an example. And so when we read this, we see that our new person needs to want what we have. We're going to demonstrate to them what we have, because it is not enough to talk about it. You're going to know a person by their actions, not by their words. If you decide you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, that certainly does not say to search and search among all the possible potential sponsors out there until you find one who'll go easy on you. Or you'll find someone who says, "Don't worry about the steps, my dear. I'll tell you when you're ready to work the steps, and then we will work probably one each year." Because just remember, you don't have to get well by Thursday. If you're willing to go to any length to get it. Now, again, we're going to hear this in several different places as we go through the rest of the book. But remember that we have agreed to go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. What's the next word? Then. That means now. Right now. Right then. At that point, when you have made this decision, right then, you are ready to take certain steps. Not when your lazy sponsor gets around to it a year from now. Right then. Let's go to page 96, please. I want to show you every step of the way here just how consistent this big book is. Page 96. You have been working with a new person. You have given them the big book, and you have asked them to read the book. The whole book. And they've done so. Suppose you're making your second visit to a man. He's read this volume and says he is prepared to go through with the 12 steps of the program of recovery. That's just what we got through reading. You want what we have, willing to go to any lengths to get it, ready to take certain steps. Having had the experience yourself, you give much practical advice. Let them know you're available. If he wishes to make a decision, tell the story. In other words, the big book backs up the precise meaning of this sentence as soon as we get into the instructions for working with a new person. At the second meeting, we take them immediately to the steps if they indicate that they have decided they want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it. Got it?
Got it.
Okay. Next paragraph, page 58. 58. Some of these we balk. Some of these, the word "these" there means the steps. But some of these steps we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way. You find that all the way through the rooms these days. And people snap up the easier, softer way just as soon as it's offered. And there's plenty of offering going on. You don't have to write down your inventory. All you got to do is fill in the blanks on Joe and Charlie's form. You don't have to write a narrative which disgorges all this stuff from your head onto paper. We've done all your thinking for you. Just put check marks. You don't have to separate your wrongs from the wrongs that others have done you. You put them all together in one mix-max. Because then you can say, Well, I see what she did to me, but no wonder she did that to me, because look what I did to her. Therefore, I shouldn't hate her anymore. Therefore, the conclusion is, I don't hate her anymore. Balderdash. Big Book does not indulge itself ever in comparative fault. That's not the way it's written. We take each of these things and consider them separately, because they must be, in order for us to find out what's wrong with us. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. Am I convinced when I get over here to page 60? Being convinced that I could not find an easier, softer way. With all earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Am I convinced that I need to do that? Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Now, there are two absolutes there. The word absolutely, of course, means exactly what it says. The word nil means zero, zilch, nada, nothing. We're not going to get anything until we have let go, absolutely. Well, now, what is the third step all about? Certainly, it is evidence of our decision to let go absolutely. And it is these are the first steps in the direction of letting go. We're not going to hold on to our old ideas. Why old ideas? What's the significance of that? Did you ever stop to think what all these words mean? When we teach our sponsees, we need to teach them what's going on here. Hold on to my old ideas. What's the significance? We learned this when we were looking at the second step, didn't we? The lack of power, this was our dilemma. What does that mean? It means not that we are powerless over our actions, we're powerless over our thinking, our old ideas. Everything I knew when I got here was wrong. I'd start over again. Through the power of the steps and the power of God and the help of my sponsors, I had to build a whole new way of thinking. The Big Book will tell us in a couple more pages that we're reborn. It's a rebirth of thinking. For some of us who may have certain religious beliefs, that may have a totally different significance. But here in the Big Book, it means that we have let go of all our old ideas, and that we have, through God's grace, we have achieved all brand new ideas. A new way of living, a new way of looking at things, a new way of looking at ourselves and our place in the universe. And unless we do that, the results will be nil until we let go of all that old stuff, absolutely. Now, one of the biggest problems you're going to find with your sponsees, they want to hang on for dear life to some of that stuff because it has been so ingrained and pounded and beaten into them that they believe that they cannot survive without pandering and catering to all that old stuff. And we have to show them and teach them how to let go. They may not want to do it, but it's a strange thing on the way to sobriety that when we work the steps, we do in fact achieve a release from the old ideas. What's the promise again? Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. We will be reborn. And this happens automatically, and it will happen if they will do the work. Everybody got that now? Please, if any of this doesn't make sense or it's not clear, we'll keep working on it until we get it cleared up. It tells us then, being convinced means being convinced that this is so, that I'm going to have to be willing to let go of all my old ideas, and I'm going to have to let go absolutely or I will not receive the results that are promised. Going on then, remember we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. And without help, it's too much for us. Am I convinced that that's so? Have I, in fact, taken a first step? Am I absolutely convinced in my innermost selves that as an alcoholic I am powerless over alcohol, that it is too much for me, that I cannot even contemplate the prospect of handling it on my own anymore, because it's proven beyond any shadow of a doubt that I'm powerless. I can't stop drinking on my own. I can't not drink. Cunning, baffling, powerful, anthropomorphizing an inanimate object, and I thought that when I first read this phrase. But so what? It is only a liquid. Can it be cunning, baffling, powerful? No, not in and of itself. We deal with alcohol, and what this means is it is an analogy, or maybe a syllogism. We're going from the substance alcohol to what it does to us, and why we permit it to continue to do those things to us. In other words, the problem is in our heads. That's where the cunning, baffling, and powerful resides, not in the bottle. Later, we will learn that the bottle is only a symbol, that alcohol is but a symptom. The problem lies in our heads. And it lies principally in the fact that we have been self-directed all of our lives, or tried to be. We've been playing God. Am I convinced that this is true? Now, here's our second step. There is one who has all power, that one is God. Am I convinced that that is so? You see what's happened here? Those two sentences show that we are convinced of the first step and the second step. That alcohol is too much for us, and there's one who has all power, that one is God. If I can say now that I'm convinced that those things are so, then of course I can say I have worked my first and second steps, and I'm now ready to move on. Everybody got that? You see how logical and how simple this all is? But we have to read it carefully and understand what it's saying to us. Every word, every phrase, every sentence in the big book is important. I don't care what chapter you find it in. You go to the 10th chapter to employers. If you left a $1,000 bill in there 3 years ago, it'll still be there because you haven't opened up the book since then. If you want to hide something, put it in chapter 8 or chapter 10, unless you happen to be a serious student of the big book, in which case you'll be referring to those chapters often, because they contain many absolute jewels of recovery wisdom. May you find him now. Am I convinced that this is my primary purpose on this earth right now, is seeking God? Remember, third pertinent idea, God can and will if I seek him. Am I now convinced that that's my primary purpose from here on out, to seek God? Next sentence, another categorical imperative. Half measures availed us nothing. Explain to your sponsee, you cannot get half recovery. There is no such a thing. You get nothing from half measures. Don't listen to the half measures gurus. They're all over the place. What are full measures? Simple, they're in here. The directions, they're all in here. These are the full measures. The half measures are just floating around out there. Most of them figments of somebody's fertile imagination. Half measures availed us nothing. Am I convinced that that is so? We stood at the turning point. Am I convinced that this is where I stand, at the turning point? At this juncture, I have to make a decision. and I have a choice. Go to page 25. We'll see what that choice is. 25, page 25. I stand at the turning point. The last partial paragraph, about 8 lines up from the bottom of page 25. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible. And if we had passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, we had but 2 alternatives. This is the only choice we have in here. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, and the other to accept spiritual help. This we did because we honestly wanted to and were willing to make the effort. That's the choice. Back on page 59, we stood at the turning point. What decision are we going to make? The next sentence tells us, page 59. We therefore, put the word therefore in there and just fill it in your mind. We therefore ask His protection and care with complete abandon. Am I convinced that I must do that? What is asking His protection and care with complete abandon? It is the third step. You see how these few sentences have led us, first step, second step, and now to the third step. Am I convinced that I must ask God's protection and care with complete abandon? And then here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. Just exactly the same suggestion you will receive from the jump master as you're about to exit the airplane to make your first parachute. The suggestion will be, pull the ripcord. You don't have to. But we highly suggest it. Am I convinced that these 12 steps have worked for millions of others, that they are working for my sponsor, for the people who have become my support group, for the people in my home group? Am I convinced that these steps have worked for them? Am I convinced that these steps will work for me? Am I convinced? See, there's a whole lot to these 2 little words, isn't there? Being convinced. And you see how wonderful it is, what a great opportunity you have when you get to this point with your sponsee, to be able to teach them right from what they've been hearing at every meeting exactly what all these things mean. Because now it gets into context of you. Are you convinced? It brings it right home. It's no longer an academic exercise. It's no longer something that we just gloss over and we let wash over us while we're waiting for the real meeting to start. This is the real meeting. Much of the time in many meetings, the best part and the strongest part and the only part of the meeting that has anything to do at all with recovery will be reading chapter 5. That's the truth of it. We are not, nor I hope, pray to God, we will ever be Problems Anonymous. And I hope we never do, and I pray that we never do, identify our chair people as facilitators. You know, that's the modern term now for somebody who leads a group, encounter group, a facilitator. They used to be, leaders or something. Now they're, I don't know what they're facilitating. Anyway, I'm not nearly as jaundiced about our good friends in the healing professions as I sound. My emphasis here is to let us all consider what our job is because much of what our new people have learned who have been in the clutches, that's not nice, who have been subjected to, no, that's not right here, who have been treated by the very best minds in the psychological, psychiatric, and counseling professions, and these people are dedicated professionals, many of them are. But unfortunately, much of what your new sponsee has learned is not only utterly useless, but is counter to what they must learn from you. So it's important for us to understand what we're dealing with. Particularly will you find that they have been given massive excuses for their crapped out behavior, which they have loved to receive. Freedom from any self-doubt, freedom from any kind of guilt, because after all, they are responsible, not me. Also, it's important for us to remember that Alcoholics Anonymous program of action is not a feel-good program. It's got nothing to do with feel-good. It has to do with surrender to a higher power and recovery from a deadly disease. It's got nothing to do with feel-good. And every time we concentrate on feel-good, we get clear off base. If my concern with you as my sponsee is that you not ever feel bad, I'm never going to show you how to grow. How many people make the mistake in the fifth step as sponsors, spending half the time in the fifth step expatiating on their own sins and how rotten they were, trying to make their sponsee feel better? How many times do we make the mistake of telling people that their fourth and fifth step must include a large amount of statements about how wonderful they have been, what good things they have done? What does the fifth step in the big book say? One sentence is the whole fifth step. Anybody remember what that sentence is? We pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Why? Because it's the bad stuff that's killing us, not the good stuff. It's the bad stuff that has to be flushed out of our systems. It's the bad stuff we have to admit so that we can go to God in our seventh step and ask Him to take it away. When you think about it that way, it makes sense, doesn't it? It makes sense that we ought to shy clear away from any effort to make our sponsees feel good. That's not our job. That's God's job. And there isn't any question about it. They're going to feel great. But we didn't give them feel great. God did. Remember, we're leaving the results up to Him. We carry the message, and we let God have the results. He knows a hell of a lot better how to do that than we do. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order! I can't go through with it." Now, Bill, I'll bet you never heard anybody say that. And I've been around here 38 years, and I've never heard anybody say that, except reading chapter 5. Did anybody ever come up to you and say, wow, what an order. I can't go through with it? If that ever happened, you'd have to say, my God, Eureka, Bill was right after all. Oh, well. What? An order?
Yeah.
What an order. Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. Am I convinced that that is so? We are not saints. This is kind of it looks like a falling back from the positive statements made before, but it's not. It is reflective of something which most people just aren't aware of this, but it's kind of interesting when you follow through this whole syllogism. You remember that in the 12 and 12, we have the St. Francis prayer, which Bill put in there as an example of what some of them used for meditation. It has now been twisted, turned, perverted, and made into the 11-step prayer as if it were AA orthodoxy. It is not, nor could it ever be, because it is a sectarian prayer and it speaks of an afterlife, neither one of which is acceptable under our traditions. We are not a religion, and we in no way can promote religion. Certainly we are not sectarian. Certainly this is not a religion. However, think about that prayer, and then think about where these guys came from who wrote this book. They were under the influence of the Oxfordians, who believed that if you worked their 12 steps, you would become perfect. And they found out that wasn't true for them. They also found out that they darn sure weren't saints. And so they had to put this disclaimer in here. Nothing like perfect adherence to these principles. By the way, this reminds me of another of the pet sayings around here, which is absolutely false. That the only step we have to work perfectly is the first step. Utterly false. We're talking about the third step right now. We have a prayer and we have a decision. Does the third step mean that we can partly decide to quit playing God? Does it mean that we only decide to let God be our director in certain matters and not others? That we are not going to permit God to be the father and we be the child? He can only be the stepfather. Well, what nonsense. And when we use the third step prayer, does it mean that we only have to half mean it? We don't have to, and the words are in the book, it means we don't have to read it perfectly? What nonsense. What about the second step? Second step is a belief, isn't it? Came to believe. Does it mean that we only have to partly believe? Or that we only have to believe that God is, we don't have to believe that He can restore us to sanity? Or that we don't have to believe He is, but we have to believe He can restore us to sanity? Try to take that and twist it around and see that it is utterly ridiculous. Take a look at the sixth step. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. You see any wiggle room in there? Anything that can be less than perfect? How about the seventh step? It's a prayer. Are we going to ask God to take away only part of our defects? And only do that part-time? Take a look at the eighth step. We became willing to make amends to them all. We had a list of all the people we've harmed. Are we going to only do that part way? We can throw away some of them? You see, we have to be so careful of these things and think them through. When you hear these aphorisms which are scattered around through the rooms, think them through. Compare them with the big book. Compare them with the steps before you repeat them, and try, because you're going to get your sponsee totally confused. You tell them on the one hand everything in here is categorical, all these things are imperative, all these things are absolutes, but not really. The point is that we're willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we've set down are guides to progress. The principles we've set down means the 12 steps. If you have any doubt that the steps are the principles are the steps, just read that sentence. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. The Oxfordians claim perfection. Our guys found out it wasn't true for them. They therefore disclaimed spiritual perfection because they found out that that was the road to destruction. the moment that we begin to think that we're spiritually perfect, we can quit working, can't we? We've already reached perfection. We found out, as the Big Book tells us, that this must continue for a lifetime. Yes, Brian?
Yeah, I was at the archives meeting a week or 2 weeks ago, and there was a picture of Eddie and Dr. and W side by side, and Eddie actually looked pretty good, you know, he looked healthy. But did he, and he was at a convention center, I think in the early 70s, no, Eddie never became successful with the 6 steps of the Astorians.
You never what?
He never became successful with the 6 steps of the Astorians. Not many people did, but did he ever, if he was still hanging out with Bill W. with around all those spiritual people at a convention, did he ever grasp the program? Did he ever have, you know, time of sobriety besides the 6 months he had with the Astorians?
Oh, certainly. But when was this picture taken?
I'm just guessing. They're both very old. They both look very healthy. And I think it was like, I don't know when Bill W. died, but I think it was like 71, 72, 73 in that area.
Yeah.
Convention.
The convention was 1970.
7. Okay.
Huh? Miami, yeah. And Bill died in the Miami Heart Institute next January. Just a couple months later.
So at that time, was Ebby grasping the 12 steps? Was he sober?
Ebby was in and out a lot. I don't know too much about his history. I think there's a book out about him, but I haven't read it. Have you seen that Ebby book? I haven't either. I've been told it is. But what's the point?
I was just curious.
Oh, okay. I was just curious what the point was. But
You brought up
What
Ebby's
is your
name.
roll on spiritual lines?
Okay. Finally, our description of the alcoholic, chapter agnostic, personal adventure, fore and aft, clear three printed ideas. We already went over that. And the next sentence is being convinced. And now we know what we have to be convinced of, right? Anybody got any questions about it? And if anything occurs to you during this week, please write them down. We'll be glad to try to clear them up. Next week we will get into the 3rd step itself. And that you will find if you read ahead from page 60 through 63, there's a ton of stuff in there. You may want to familiarize yourself with those pages in the meantime. And any announcements for the good of AA?
It's good.
Be good, did you say?
It's good.
Oh, AA is good, all right. Any commercial announcements like dances or whoopee parties or anything like that?
This is gratitude dinner at the Bottom Line, Saturday the 30th.
No.
Excuse me. And there's you don't have to show up, that's okay. And there's an alcohol Wednesday from 12 to Thursday at 12.
Yeah, okay. And by the way, if any of you have been coming to our Thursday night Big Book study at the Bottom Line, we won't be doing it this next Thursday. That'll be in the middle of their Alcathon over there. So that'll be continued the following Thursday. Yes, Brian?
And if anybody doesn't know, there's Thanksgiving dinner here. We can't any family members, and it's all you can eat, and it's free. So if anybody's here,
Free, did you say free? Oh, the magic word. And our group is preparing through the good offices and the super deluxe oven of Linda. We're preparing a turkey, I assume.
Wow.
Or did you forget?
No, I
You didn't forget, okay.
I was just.
All right. We wouldn't want to be embarrassed if you didn't show up with a turkey.
Silence of the yams.
All right, let's close the meeting.
Big things down to the end.
Might not.
Let this circle represent the unity of our fellowship. Have a moment of silence for those who are still suffering. And then we'll say the Lord's Prayer together. In the stairway group, we don't say anything after we say amen. Thank you. Lord's Prayer. Our Father,
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Okay, help Marilyn get this place cleaned up, will you?
You said that.
None of my damn business, I just carry that. Oh, okay, good. As long as you're doing that, it's all right.
I'm doing my best. They called me, it was my best effort.
Sergeant Major, do me a favor.
Yes, sir. Anything you want.
Will you get the wandering ones outside and tell them to come in? We're ready to go.
So far, so good, Jim.
Huh?
So far, so good. You're doing a good job.
Thank you.
That 10 minutes went, 10 minutes went really fast.
What?
The 10 minutes out there went real fast.
Oh, yeah.
So beautiful out today. Like
It
paradise.
is gorgeous, isn't it? You look so sad today. You need to talk? What? Sure. It's up to you, honey, what you want to do. Sorry about that, kid. All right, guys, let's get going. I want to pay attention now. Pay attention, please. I want to remind you that the Stairway Group meets again at 7:30 this evening. We're studying the Big Book together. You're all cordially invited to join us. And at 9:15 we have a third meeting every Saturday. And in that we are working with the language of the heart. And it's a really nice little meeting. Now we're going back to page 58, please.